this is a bit of a special morning for us as a church. Some of you may or may not know this, but we are a part of a kind of an emerging church planting intentional network with reunion church plants happening in different parts of the country, which some of you may or may not know. And so this week we had some denominational meetings, and so all of our pastors from all over Canada in all different kinds of BIC, our denominational churches, were together. And Dave Drinkwalter from St. John's, Newfoundland, Reunion St. John's, was with us. And Eric and I from Eric's in Hamilton. I'm here, so representing Ontario. And then our most recent friend from Richmond BC, Dean Morris, was all together. And so I just want to acknowledge those guys because we're all in the same place at the same time, which is really cool. So Dave Drinkwalter's right here. Best pastor I know, Dave Drinkwalter. And then Eric, you guys know Eric from Hamilton. He's been around a lot. Eric's too tired to stand up. Eric has a bad attitude this morning. And then Dean, this is Dean Morris right here, guys. All the way from BC. And so Dean's going to be coming up in just a minute to share a little bit, because we wanted to take advantage of the chance when Dean was here just to get to know him a little bit. But I was really proud of our midweek group this Tuesday. So some of you will know at least in sports, some sports traditions, so certainly in baseball, if a rookie hits a home run or something, gets a hit, when they get their first hit and there's a rookie, sometimes his team pulls like the silent treatment on him. So say like the first hit happens or he hits a home run and then he comes back to the dugout where they should normally be celebrating. Everyone kind of just gives the cold shoulder and completely ignores. Yeah, like this. So this player here for the Rays hit his first home run, and his team totally just ignored him as he comes back. It's like the cold shoulder. So I felt like it'd be really fun when Dean flies in. So he flew in on Tuesday evening. So prepping the midweek group, I'm like, Dean's going to be flying in. He's going to get a cab, come to midweek. So when he comes in, just completely ignore him. Pretend he doesn't exist. And so, I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but like I just want to celebrate our midweek. Like they rocked it. So Dean came in, we had been having dinner, we were hanging around, and he came in, and I didn't get to see it all because I was in the kitchen at the time, but apparently he waved at a couple people and they just totally looked away. And as he was walking down the hall to the kitchen, I think it was Diana Simmons, like locked eyes with Dean, and he smiles, and then she just kind of freaked out and turned away. And so we had I'm not sure how Dean felt about that, but that was our loving welcome to the Reunion family. There's another part of the story, though, that I only learned after the fact that makes the cold shoulder feel rather insensitive. So here's what happened when Dean arrived in Toronto. We didn't know this, obviously, because he was just arriving to our midweek group. So here's what happened. He got off. He's only been in Ontario 3 times, right? And he doesn't have a lot of street smarts. You'll pick that up when he starts sharing in a few minutes. So Dean gets off the plane, and he's looking for a cab, and there's the big signs, cabs and limos or whatever. But there's a guy there, and he's like, hey, are you looking for a cab? And Dean's like, yeah. He's like, follow me. First clue, right? Everyone should know that. So, and then the guy's on his Bluetooth. First of all, who uses a Bluetooth headset? So that should be clue 2. So he's on his Bluetooth, and he's talking about getting this guy. And then he leads Dean up the escalator to another level. And now he's leading him out of the terminal, clearly not near the limos or the taxis. And the guys, and to Dean's credit, he knew something seemed a little strange. But all of a sudden, this guy's talking. He leads Dean now right out into the middle of the road, kind of in the traffic, and waves. And all of a sudden, this unmarked minivan comes flying up, and stops right in front of him. They open the door, and they're like, get in, like that. And then Dean's kind of freezes because there's no taxi logos or stickers of any kind. There's no meter. There's nothing. It's just an empty, unmarked minivan. And then security comes running out of the terminal like, don't get in that van! And he's like, I wasn't going to get in. And then that van, the guy who was leading him with the awkward Bluetooth, jumps in, and that van peels out of there. And so then Dean was like, he almost got kidnapped. Our newest church planter almost lost his life, maybe, and would have been no more. And so then, imagine that was his intro to coming to Toronto. And then he came to our house, which should be a safe, welcoming place, and Diana Simmons totally looks him off. Can you imagine? Anyways, welcome, Dean. Really glad you're here. Welcome, Dean. We're glad you're here. We're glad you're safe. So when we started this church 3 years ago, we tried to pay attention to what we sensed God was saying and doing in us, some of the rhythms we were starting to live out, rhythms of life in terms of daily relationship with Jesus we thought were important. Dave Drinkwalter was a part of some of those conversations because he was in the midst of trying to figure out if they were going to plant in St. John's. So there was this kind of collaborative dreaming and praying while we in Oakville were already starting to meet and gather. And we came up with these 6 culture statements that don't define, it's not about theology, it's not about doctrine, it's more about praxis. It's like, how do we want to live and what do we think is really important for us? 6 kind of values, if you will, that no matter where you are, we think are important as followers of Jesus to live into these things. And so as we were figuring out what it meant to plant different churches, individual churches, but choosing to work together, we came up with these 6 different culture statements. If you've been around for a while, like last fall, we took 6 weeks and we just taught through them all. And we've done that a couple times. You can, if you're interested, you can jump back online and listen to any of those teachings or watch any of those teachings. But these were the 6 culture statements: pupils, people, party, peacemakers, pioneers, and planters that hold us all together. So these are the values as more churches are joining kind of the specific reunion network. These are the things, this is the kind of glue that holds us together. Again, it's not a theological thing. It's not a doctrinal thing. It's about rhythm and practice. And so each person is saying, how is God showing up in these ways in our community? How are we being intentional about the way we gather and order our lives and our practice? So it's really good. So what I wanted to do, since Dean was here, is to invite him to come, and we're going to just touch on a couple of these, kind of the glue that holds us together, and get a chance to learn from Dean's journey to Jesus and where he's at now and what he sensed God's saying to him and his family as they're getting ready and just starting to plant in another city. So that's what we're going to do this morning. So Dean, come join me. Let's welcome Dean. Come on. He's here and he's alive. And that is a good thing. Here, you can use this, brother. I don't know. Do you need this? Do you want that? No. Okay. So, so often when we do kind of like story time together, when people share their stories, one of the questions that frame our conversation is we often say, like, why Jesus? So I think it would be really great, even just to start, when we think about being pupils and apprentices of Jesus, that no matter where we are all in our own way on a journey spiritually. Some of us are at the very front edge where, like Jamie's quote said, maybe there's something stirring in us, the now in quote, there's something stirring us, we're aware of something more, but in search of what that really looks like. And then others of us have said, in that pursuit of more, we've landed on Jesus, and that's what we want to be about, and we're at different stages then of figuring out what following Jesus looks like. So can you just share a little bit about why Jesus for you, your journey with Jesus, just so we can get to know you a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for welcoming me so warmly, especially on Tuesday. Shout out to the midweek. That was awesome. Thank you, Matt. No, it's great. It's great for me to be able to be here and see all of you and to worship alongside you. And in many ways, I won't jump ahead, but is really a dream come true. And I shared that at our first gathering, and I think that kind of caught some people by surprise. And there's a good reason for why being here with you all would be a moment of really just celebration for me. So thank you for welcoming me and having me and being part of the team, even though I'm way out in BC. So
we actually have a picture of, so some of you may recognize Dean, because Dean and his wife Ayla and their one daughter were here in, was it May or June?
June.
This is before they had decided that they were going to plant. They were on the edge. Their hearts were still a little bit hard. We were praying that God would soften them. And we took them. They came and hung out with us for a week, maybe about a weekend or so. Yeah, and then we took them to Niagara. Obviously, you got to go to Niagara Falls, so we went to Niagara Falls. So this was before. So anyways, in case you recognize Dean, he was kind of around.
Yeah, I was actually here in June at Reunion on a Sunday morning. And it was awesome. It was, again, just a great experience to be able to be with you all and hear Matt share. He did the thing about the daily examine, because it was kind of the last Sunday before the summer flea, where everyone goes to the lake or whatever. But it was so good. It was so good to kind of just see it in the real, you know. And it put flesh and bones on this idea, this concept of what planting a church could look like, and specifically planting a church in the stream of those 6 culture statements that make Reunion unique in the way that you all together as a community are deciding to journey with and follow Jesus. So, yeah, that was kind of the beginning of the big transition in my life, where my hard heart of black stone began to soften to the will of Jesus. But for me, I didn't grow up in the church. I was raised with parents who loved me. They would do anything for me. But just church, I have an older brother. For church, we didn't really go. It was like funerals or the occasional wedding was my experience of church. And it was probably like an Anglican church maybe. Not that there's anything bad about that, but it was always an old guy in like long gowns with a beard or something. And he just seemed to be the representative of God. And it didn't seem super friendly. As a young kid, you're often like scared of these big guys in their robes, and it just didn't make any sense for me as a kid. And as I grew up, there was no place. I had no box for faith or for Christianity. I thought my life was great. I had lots of friends growing up. Throughout high school, I played sports. I traveled with teams, and I always had no big struggles in my own life. And I thought my view of faith and Christianity was that it was kind of this crutch that people who, had broken homes or were really, weak or whatever needed to kind of get through the day. And for me, I just didn't experience that. And through my journey, when I was a high school student, I had a basketball coach who was a Christian guy, and he was like an amazing mentor for me. And he talked to us one day at the end of our game. It was the never lose your last game, he always said. It was our last game of the playoffs, and if we won, we were going to go on to provincials, whatever. And he just said, his pregame talk was like, listen, I love you guys all so much. We've had this incredible year together. I just want you to know that no matter what happens tonight, whether we win or lose, I love you guys. And you all matter so much to me, and I pray for you every night. And that was the first time anybody had ever said that to me. And it out of all of the stuff throughout the season, throughout that talk, like getting hyped for the game, that really stuck with me. And it kind of was a turning point where I started to wonder, like, what does that mean? And he was a great guy. I loved him. I trusted him. We were friends. We still are. So his kind of influence in my life started me on a trajectory towards Jesus. And as a young man, I was big into social justice. I loved Rage Against the Machine. It was like my favorite band because they were like for the down and outer. And, the world was wrong, and we needed to work to make it right. And so I had this bent in me. And actually, through a social studies project, I had to identify two heroes. And so I chose Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. And part of the project, it was actually really brilliant, if there's any social studies teachers in the room. Part of the project was identify two heroes of your heroes. And so for both of those guys, for Gandhi and Martin Luther King, kind of in their footnotes of life, who they looked up to, both of them, obviously Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. cited Jesus, but so did Gandhi. And so these two guys that I looked up to, as well as my coach Eric, they all had Jesus as part of their story, as part of their narrative that formed them and shaped them. And so I started asking the question. I still joke with Eric. I'm like, this must have been the easiest youth unlimited evangelism ever. We were driving home from a game, and it was just him and I and my buddy Dustin, who was kind of in the similar vein of understanding faith. And I just said, so Eric, you got to tell me about Jesus. And he's like, what? So easy, right? It's like such a home run for him. But that was really the start of me pursuing a relationship with Christ. And I began to see that religion and Christianity and faith wasn't about being or behaving a certain way because of these external rules or structures or systems, but it was living in response to the person of Jesus. And the thing that really made the penny drop for me was again, this mentor in my life said to me, even if at the end of the day I'm wrong and there's no afterlife, there's no heaven, and following Jesus here on earth was just kind of a way to live. He goes, if I could go back and do it all over again, I would still commit to following Jesus because of what it's done in my life, because of the way it's shaped me and formed me to be a better version of myself, a better version of who God has created me to be. And I just remember as a kid who was skeptical but interested, that really clicked for me because it made it not about escaping to heaven when you die someday. It made it about the here and the now. And I just felt like that's what matters. And so faith for me became something that was kind of esoteric and out there, and you do this thing and then you can go to heaven when you die. But it became about making a difference in the world because of who Christ is. And that was really that was really what set me on the course towards intentionally following Jesus.
Yeah, so maybe now just tell us, like, so you're a teenager, you decide to follow Jesus, your coach has huge influence on you, and then talk about maybe a little bit about that entry point, deciding to follow Jesus, and then role of church community, meeting Ayla, that whole ball of wax that have been kind of like the last 10 years of your life ministry, like leadership-wise.
So it's really interesting. Like my whole social circle evolved into like friends from church, but I never went. My phone would ring at like 11:45 on Sunday morning without fail, and it would be my friends from church calling me up to be like, yo, church is done. You want to go to Wendy's and grab some lunch and then go back to gym? You want to come back and like play ball or whatever, or just hang out? So I was like, okay, I'm on my way. And my parents would drive me to Wendy's like after church, and I'd hang out all day. Like literally, I hung out at the church or with my church friends Monday through Saturday night, and then like a brief time where I just didn't see them on Sunday morning from like 9:30 to 11:30. And then I would hang out with them again. And so it was through the relationships that these people invested in me. They cared about me. They always invited me. This is a little side story. We often feel awkward about inviting our friends to church because, like, what if they say no? My group of friends growing up, I have to give it to them because I probably said no to them like 100 times. That's not an exaggeration. Every night we hang out Saturday night eating pizza, whatever. Dude, come to church with us in the morning. Nah. Next Saturday, same scene. They were just, and in a way that wasn't like aggressive or awkward. It was just so natural. And so I just want, that's an encouragement to you. Just invite people because you never know. Some people are like me, really stubborn, hard-hearted people. It take a while, so don't give up on those people, man. But so through those relationships, I just came to see a community of faith that was just different than what I'd ever expected. And started plugging in. I started helping out with kids ministry. I was in a band in high school, so I plugged into the worship team. I remember the first song I played on bass was Agnes Day. I don't know if you guys remember that song, but it's like a throwback. We actually talked about it last night. Worthy is the Lamb. And so that I was like, I don't even know if I believe this, but I love these people, and I love playing, and I love where I'm at. And it was just this real entry point for me to ask questions, and they made this gracious space for me to learn and grow in my discipleship journey. And so it was such a huge way for me to connect. And my story started to intertwine with the story of Jesus as I learned more and just kind of allowed myself to live into that.
And then you started dating the pastor's daughter.
And then I started dating the pastor's daughter, which helps. So I was this rebel community kid, right? Didn't grow up in the church, and I came from the Mennonite Brethren tradition. If you know what that is, it's funny that it's all like the same last names. And then this kid walks in who's like a Morris. And my now father-in-law at the time, he's like, what kind of last name is that, right? Like, it should be Newfold or what. Hey, he was joking, but I didn't know at the time. I was terrified of him, which now I laugh at. But I started dating Ayla. She became my wife. And it was just like this amazing community of people that shaped who I am today. And really, I was just invested in like a radical way. I still don't know what they thought. Even when the worship pastor left our church, he went to go plant a church, and they invited me I'd fill in for him when he was away or whatever, and they invited me to take the role for a 6-month kind of temporary, let's test it out, let's see if you're good enough, let's see if you can do it. And I was like, don't you need someone who like knows what they're doing? But they're just like, man, we see gifting in you, and we want to encourage you and support you and just like set you up in this way, and we'll reevaluate in 6 months. And then 10 years later, I ended up resigning from my church in the best possible way. Thank God it was a celebration, because they saw me as this kid who had grown up in the faith and literally grown up, and they knew that this opportunity of stepping out in faith was me following what they had empowered me to do, which was just learn from and lean into the leadings of Christ. And so they kind of described it as, when the kids grow up, you do everything in your power as a parent. For those of you in the room who have kids, you do everything in your power to raise your kids up so they can grow up and be mature and kind of stand on their own 2 feet. And you want to send them out to move out of the house, but once they're at the front door to move out of the house, you've done all this work to get them there. You want to stand in front of the door and be like, don't leave, you're staying. And they kind of framed it in that story. They're like, we've invested in you, we've seen God work in you, and now this is a kingdom win. You're going out and you're doing your own thing. And so it was just an immense blessing.
Yeah, so 2 summers ago, I started a master's program in MA and a school in California. And so it's an online degree. I've talked to many of you about it, but once a year we have to be down with our class. And so 2 summers ago was our kickoff for the program. And so flew from Toronto to LA and then LA into Fresno. And the flight from LA to Fresno, I see this really weird looking guy get on the plane, and I'm like, who is that guy? Actually, I didn't see you at all. But
I saw you.
You saw me?
Yeah.
You thought I was the old weird guy.
Everyone gets what they deserve, right? So I got like row 1. A plane from LAX to Fresno is like,
it's really small.
Really small. And so I got row 1 because, and then they like put all the weird people at the back. And so all these people come on, and then this guy walks on, and I see this kind of youngish looking guy. Little did I know, he's way older than me. He comes like way spiritual father, like figuratively, almost literally. Not really. But so this guy gets on the plane. I'm like, oh, he looks like a hip dude, I suppose. And then I'm like, I wonder if he's part of the program. Like, who's flying to Fresno, right? And I see him come on. This is the neck tat as he walks past. I'm like, oh, no way, no way.
So yeah, thank you. So then we were hanging out.
I was worried the plane was.
We were hanging out that week and just got to know Dean. And we were one night out at In-N-Out Burger. So if you've ever been to In-N-Out Burger, it's like so good, so good. And all like good things happen around the table with food. And so it was really late at night. We got a cab, went to In-N-Out Burger, and we're hanging out. And Dean was sharing some of his story. And one of the things I love about the place God has just dropped me into is the chance to walk with people and talk with them through ideas and the sense of what God's doing. And as Dean was sharing, I'm like, this guy's got to plant a church. Like, he doesn't know it yet, but he's right there. God is doing some things in his life. He's opening Dean up in really cool ways. And I'm just like, man, I just want to keep encouraging Dean. And so that's how our friendship really got started, is over the last year plus, was just phone calls and checking in. And so anyways, why don't you tell us then about the last little bit. We have 2 culture statements that revolve around new things. So one is being pioneers, about adventure and innovation, that we really believe as we follow Jesus, we want to be dreamers about new ways of bringing the kingdom of Jesus into our communities and our cities, and pioneering and innovating new things and not getting stuck. And one of the values as a church, even as we are planting and establishing ourselves, is to be a church that plants and helps other planters get started, an idea of multiplication. And so it really kind of lines up with 2 things as you're innovating and forming and planting. So why don't you just speak to a little bit of what God's been doing and how he's awakening you and what that might mean for us.
Right. Yeah. So about 3 years ago, Road to Hope, you guys or some of you are running this next weekend? 2 weekends from now.
2 weeks, yeah.
And so I'm a runner. So for people who run, they get it. They're like, yes. For people who don't, they're like, you people. What? Why would you do that, right, Eric? Like, that is terrible. But
so dumb.
But I discovered that I actually really enjoy running, and it became not just like a physical discipline that you do. I'm a little bit like ADHD, so I need to just burn my energy. Otherwise, my wife literally is like, go outside and do something. You're driving me crazy. But so I get out there and I'm running along, and at this point in my life, I was at an established church. I was a worship pastor there. I loved the team that I served. I loved the church community that I was in. I still do. No desire, no inkling of like, hey, I'm going to step out and plant a church, or this is like on my heart and I got to pray and process this thing. Not even in my headspace whatsoever. So I put on my running shoes, leave our apartment. I run for about 1 kilometer. There's this historic ship place right on the river. It empties out into the majestic Pacific Ocean. You can imagine it, maybe. It looks like some of your lakes out here. They're huge. But so I'm running along, and there's this old heritage site. It's called Britannia Shipyard. And it's about 1 kilometer from our front door. And so at this point in time, like, everything stops hurting a little bit. You just kind of start to get into the zone of this. Even though I'm moving, it's like this stillness where I can pray and process, and it's beautiful. So out of nowhere, the nothing box that I'm in while I'm running, this voice, my voice, but it's this thought that comes through and is like, this would be a great spot for a church. And I literally stopped in my tracks because I was like, what was that? And I kind of, because it was so far out of the blue. It'd be like one of you who are going, man, I could never plant a church because I'm not even a pastor, going for lunch today and being like, I should plant a church in this Burger King. Like, it's just so out of my world at that time. And so I just stopped and I prayed. I said, I have no idea, God. I'm so not ready. I'm not equipped. There's a whole bunch of things that I need to learn and do. But if this is from you, then yes. But Lord, I'm going to need some help. And so I just kind of stopped, and then I just got back running, and about another couple kilometers away, there's a place called Gary Point Park, and it's right out at the edge of the water or whatever. So I ran out there, and from that time of kind of praying that to out at the park, in a way that's never happened to me before, I just kind of received this picture of what it would look like what the church could look like from like kind of unimportant details, like fickle details, like what the sandwich board would look like and what kind of coffee we'd serve, but ultimately like the type of relationships and the way we would cultivate people to be followers of Jesus. I just saw it, and so I just stopped again. I just prayed, and I was getting a little misty. I was like, oh God, like this is a thing. Like I can actually, in my mind's eye, like I can see this, and it started to get me really excited. But at the same time, I was like, I had never thought about this before in this kind of way. And so I ran home and, showered up, whatever. It was evening, so we went to bed, watched the show with my wife, like The Bachelor or something. Like, she likes it, but not me. But so the next day I talked to her and I said, Ayla, this is what happened. Like, what do you think about this? And she's like the reasonable, rational, sensible one in the relationship. And so I was ready for her to say almost what I was hoping she would say, which is like, no, we can't do this. Like, this is crazy. Why would you leave an established church to step out and do this thing? And she was just like, she looked at me for a second, and I'm like waiting for her to like shut down my dream so I can be like, okay, phew. She's like,
crush this one, crush this one.
Yeah, right? Almost. And she's like, she's like, wow, that would be really cool. Like, there's nothing like that in this community. Like, that would be really good. And I was just like, whoa. And then over the course of the next few months, like in a way that I began to feel a bit like Jonah, if you're familiar with the story, people who really had no business in my life, speaking into my life in a meaningful way, like they were just kind of acquaintances or like part of my church, that it would be kind of a disservice if I left. They pulled me aside and said, hey man, I was praying about this, or I was thinking, we were talking about this, we had people over for dinner, and you came up and were like, wow, Dean should plant a church in Steveston, which is the community where we live. And I was just like, what? And they're like, does that mean anything to you? And I was like, no. And I'm literally like getting goosebumps. And within the course of a month, like 3 different people kind of confirmed this in me. And so I was like, oh my goodness. And just through some things by default and some by design, I ended up having this conversation with my lead pastor saying, I don't know what this is at, where I'm at, but this is something I think I'd like to pursue. And he was like, amazing. Like, we started a whiteboard session kind of thing, like what do you need to do to get there? And then through some circumstances that we don't need to go into for time's sake, that conversation got shelved, and we just didn't pick it up again until about last summer when Matt and I met. And over In and Out, as we were crushing these burgers, I was hearing Matt articulate these culture statements, sharing about like you all and reunion and what it's like, and it was animating that vision that I had seen. It was putting kind of flesh and bones and like real life stuff. This is our church, this is what it looks like. I was like, that's what I pictured. And so in that moment, I kind of knew, like, I think I have to do this, but there was a lot of work and a lot of things that I needed to process, and a lot of things that I needed to give to God and just kind of sit with and learn and think and process and pray. But in that moment, I was kind of like, oh man, yeah. And it was so this trajectory of a few years. Maybe I'm a slow learner. You might have picked up on that, but it takes me time to sit and to allow God to speak and feel like, okay, and it's this just kind of gut sense of like, I think I have to do this. Like, I know enough to know that I need to jump off this cliff. And so that's kind of the way God moved in me, to bring me literally here today, which is really cool.
I think it's such a privilege. Dave and Eric and Dean, we were all having dinner last night at our house. And I was just reminded, it's like an enormous privilege that as we are figuring out who we are and what God's asking us to be locally, to be able to partner and learn from and walk with and support and cheer on each other. It's really, and one day for us to be able to, I mean, Wayne, we mentioned a few weeks ago, Wayne Johnson was out in Richmond for a speaking thing with his work last month, and he came to your first gathering in your living room. So even through that, there's a sense of connection. It's just, I love what God's kind of knitting together, even though we don't really know what it all looks like ultimately.
It was amazing having Wayne there. He shared a little bit about the Reunion community from his experience, and he just reminded us that like literally 3 years and 1 week ago from the night that we met, Matt and Bobby had friends, maybe some of you are in this room, had friends in their living room and just said, hey, we want to start this thing, and like we want to give it to God. We don't know what it's going to become. And I was just like, how cool would it have been if like someone dropped in there, it's like, I'm from the future. You have a church in St. John's and Hamilton and now Richmond BC. It'd be like, well, what? Like, okay, maybe Hamilton because it's down the road, but like St. John's and Richmond, like we don't even know people there. And so for us in my living room, that group of friends to hear now 3 years later, we're the fourth expression of reunion and what it means to follow Jesus together in community in this intentional way. For them, it was just kind of like, oh, this is even bigger than like the 20 of us or so who are sitting here now. Like this is, and so it was just so beautiful to see like that relational connection by having Wayne just like randomly be in Richmond on the day that we were having our first night. It was so beautiful.
Yeah, you remember we often talk about the idea of being around the table together, and that as we have empty seats around the table, we believe that as people sit down, pull up a chair, and join us, that they very much help us then discover who we are supposed to be together. That it's not like we have it all figured out and say, hey, just come sit there, be quiet, we got it all sorted. It's more like we have a sense we're heading this way and God's doing these things and we're trying to pay attention, and then someone sits down, and as they add their gifts and their ideas and their dreams to the mix and their gifts to help us get on track even, all those things as we come around the table, there's like a more beautiful picture of the kingdom. And as churches are planted and as people come together, we all kind of learn and discover. I think that dynamic is so beautiful. Can you just, we could talk about this for a while, but just for the sake of time, can you just jump into some of those things Jesus has been teaching you, the Matthew 13 stuff, and just kind of lead us into that place of reflection? Because it's awesome that you're leading on the west side of the country, and as God stirs and teaches you guys as a community, that can also be something that we need to pay attention to and learn from.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I've got a bunch of ideas. How much time? I don't want to go over and be that guy.
10 minutes.
Okay. So I'm a natural scatterbrain. I proverbially am losing things and constantly, just by the way that I'm wired, I feel like I'm running sometimes in 10 different directions. And maybe some of you can resonate with that. I have a 4-year-old daughter. She wasn't in the picture. We left her at home with grandma because we thought like sitting in meetings and hanging out, it would be just boring for her when we came here the first time. And I can't wait to get home and give them both a squeeze. But she's amazing. She's like, she's 4. She's not even 4. She'll be 4 next month. And when I'm like getting them ready to get out the door for preschool, like making sure she has lunch and like extra clothes because it rains every day in BC, and like she's got to have a rain jacket, this, pulling stuff together, lunch, okay. We'll get to the door and she'll be like, Dad, wait. I'm like, what is this, sweetie? She goes, do you have your keys? Do you have your phone? Do you have your wallet? Because like
she gives you your checklist.
It's like the door check. Like she knows that I forgot. And like seriously, this is no joke. Like 99% of the time, I'm like, right. And I'm like, okay, I have both kids. That's the most important thing, right? But man, oh man. So I'm always losing stuff. And then when I go to find it, like my keys are the worst. Maybe you're like me. You always lose your keys. And I bought this thing to hang keys at our front door, so that I would just come in and hang them there. I think I've hung them there once. And then I turned the whole house upside down looking for the keys, and like lo and behold, the last place I check is on the key hanger, which I bought, which was useless. But so many times I'm running through our apartment, looking in pants pockets, what was I wearing? And the keys are like just right on the counter. But I'm so scattered and caught up in so many things, making sure we're not late, making sure the kids aren't like killing each other or whatever, that I miss them, and they're literally right in front of me. I don't know if that resonates with you, but I learned actually that it's not just that there's something weird about me. It's an actual condition. Thanks to Arian Mack and a guy named Irvin Rock, they're psychologists, social psychologists. They coined a term, and I'm forever grateful for them. It's called inattentional blindness. Inattentional blindness. It means, or sometimes it's called perceptual blindness. It means that you're being so caught up in everything around you that you can't actually see what's right in front of you. Inattentional blindness is a psychological lack of attention that is not associated with any vision defect or mental defect. So that made me feel good. And it may be further defined as an event in which an individual fails to perceive an unexpected stimulus that is right in plain sight. When it simply becomes impossible for one to attend to all the stimuli in a given situation, a temporary blindness effect can take place as a result. And so an individual will fail to see objects or stimuli right in front of them. Now, this research is actually sidebar. There's a really cool psychological experiment. We don't have time to do it, but when you go home, go punch into the Google not unintentional, inattentional blindness video, and watch it. It's like not even 2 minutes, and just follow the instructions. Don't read anything about it. Just watch the video. Your minds will be blown. Okay, inattentional blindness video. Google it. Don't do it now unless you're super bored, and then make sure your phone's on quiet. So there's this idea that we can be so overwhelmed by all the stuff that we're supposed to pay attention to that we miss what's right in front of us, often the most important things. And this research is relatively new. It's from the 90s, so it's in the scheme of things, it's relatively new. But this problem is not a new problem. This phenomenon is not a new phenomenon. The prophet Isaiah talked about it. Jesus talks about it, quoting the prophet Isaiah, calling people to an awareness that what they see and what they might perceive, or what they might be trying to see, what they're frantically looking for their keys, when they're really right in front of them. And in the frantic searching, we can't see what we're looking for. This phenomenon is not new, not at all. Jesus, in responding to a question he was asked, why, Jesus, do you tell stories? Why do you tell stories? He said, you've been given insight into God's kingdom. I'm reading from Matthew 13. It'll be on the screen in just a sec. Jesus, why do you tell stories? He said, you've been given insight into God's kingdom. You know how it works, speaking to his disciples. But not everyone has been given this gift, this insight. It just hasn't been given to them. Whenever someone has a ready heart for this, the insights and understandings flow freely. But if there is no readiness, any trace of receptivity soon disappears. Jesus says, that's why I tell stories, to create readiness, to nudge people towards receptive insight. In their present state, in the frenetic pace of life, they can stare till doomsday and not see it. Listen till they're blue in the face and not quite get it. Going on to quote Isaiah, he says, I don't want Isaiah's forecast to be repeated all over again. You will listen, but you will not understand. You will look, but you will not see. The people's hearts have turned to flab. Their ears are clogged, their eyes are shut. They will try to see, but they will not see. They will try to hear, but they will not hear. They will try to understand, but they will not comprehend. If they, with their blindness and deafness, so choose, then I will heal them. Jesus reminds us that many holy prophets and righteous women and men and people of prayer and doers of good have wanted to see, but did not see. They've wanted to hear, but did not hear. He says to his disciples, his followers, your eyes and ears are blessed. The sense of seeing what's right in front of them. As I reflected on this passage and as I was thinking about what God has been up to in my life, one of my prayers coming into the season of planting and joining Reunion was, God, help me see what's in front of me. God, give me wisdom. I asked him to show me what does faithfulness look like for me? What does it mean to be faithful right now? To follow you. And help me, God, trust you again. Help me to trust you. There was that sense, Jamie's reading from Henry Nouwen was just brilliant. This idea that there's something within us, but we may not be able to know, we may not be able to pinpoint exactly what that is. Help us see these things, oh Lord. And so I tried really hard. like the righteous men and righteous women. I tried really hard. I prayed hard. I attempted solitude and fasting and all these things. But really, we just need to have what Jesus calls a readiness of heart, a posture of openness that we can be nudged, not necessarily shoved full on, but just be nudged into that place where we can receive, where we can see what's right in front of us. And it's not about the religious practice of praying right or praying more or praying properly or these long, eloquent prayers. It's not about that. Jesus says very clearly, this, when they turn towards me, when they choose to be ready, then I will heal them. This is not about praying right or having it all done well. This is about being healed by receiving what Christ has for us. So I've learned that these stories are more than just stories. They're truths. They're deep truths that can shape us. Stories are kind of open-ended and can be ambiguous, but when we sit with them with a readiness of heart, they can interweave with our own stories, and we can begin to see and live the truth that's in them. And that's why I'm here. The story of reunion created a readiness in the midst of In-N-Out Burger and milkshake and all of the people coming and going from that place, the laughter that we shared. There was a deep readiness, a nudge towards what God had put in my heart 3 years ago as I went for a run. Through the story, I was moved towards readiness. There was capacity in my heart for my story to continue to engage with the story of Christ and what he is set out to accomplish in this world. So for us, for those of you here who aren't church planters, maybe there's a few in this room who don't know that you are yet, that's all right. What does this mean? What does this mean for us? I want to really reinforce that it's not about trying harder. It's not about praying better, being more disciplined, or being more holy and righteous. Jesus and Isaiah make that clear for us. It's not about these things. They will try hard to see, they say. They will try hard to hear and to understand. But Jesus' invitation to us is to first be healed, to be made whole, renewed, restored, or restoried, to be fashioned more and more in his likeness and less in the likeness that we have created for ourselves. We're going to obviously have communion together this morning, and as we move towards that, I want to just create a space, if you'll allow me, and if I may be so bold, for us to reflect on the story of Jesus, whether it's the one this morning, this from Matthew 13, of sharing stories and of not trying, but an invitation to be healed. With surrender, we sang that we surrender. And in our surrender, Christ will meet us and heal what's broken or reveal to us what needs to be healed. I want to create a space for us to reflect on these stories that Jesus shared, to reflect on your life and where you're going. We'll take just a minute or so, and then Matt will pray to close us. But in this time, as much as I want to leave it free and give you no structure, sometimes it's helpful to know what to do. I want to invite you to have a posture of openness. Invite God to give you a ready heart. Ask him to give you peace beyond your understanding, to help us see through everything that's around us to what it is we're really searching for. That inner paradise, or that inner innocence that we all have and have had and long for. It's been meaningful for me to do this over the last few months. And through a book that we've actually read for our course, we discovered a little prayer book. And I would like to lead us into this time, as I have often led myself into this time, by reading this prayer. And then at the end, I will just say amen and take some time to sit with Jesus and invite him to nudge your heart into readiness. Holy One, there is something I wanted to tell you, but there have been errands to run, bills to pay, arrangements to make, meetings to attend, friends to entertain, washing to do. And I forget what it is I wanted to say to you. And mostly I forget what I'm about or why. Oh God, don't forget me, please, for the sake of Jesus Christ. Oh Father in heaven, perhaps you've already heard what I wanted to tell you. What I wanted to ask is, forgive me, heal me, increase my courage, please. Renew in me a little of love and faith and a sense of confidence and a vision of what it might mean to live as though you were real and I mattered and everyone was sister and brother. What I wanted to ask in my blundering way is, don't give up on me. Don't become too sad about me, but laugh with me and try again with me. And I will with you too. Amen.
Jesus, we confess that sometimes sitting in silence is difficult because we're so trained and wired to do more and consider what's next and go on to the next thing and the next thing. And then whenever we take a posture of silence and solitude and try to listen, it can feel like we're being not productive enough, not good enough. Jesus, you teach us that our identity and our sense of worth doesn't come from what we do or how good we are, what other people think of us, but our identity needs to be found solely in you. And we search for identity in so many different ways, try to fulfill that longing in so many different ways. So as difficult as it is, we just want to learn to train ourselves to sit in silence and to listen to you. God, as Dean shared, we want to learn and get better at what it means to be a spiritual community that has eyes to see the ways you're working around us, to awaken to the kingdom of Jesus that is breaking out in all kinds of ways around us. But we admit sometimes we're so busy doing all the things that we need to get done that we miss out. We also know that those things are part of life. There are jobs we have and families and looking after kids, all important, really, really great things. So it's not about ignoring those things, but it's about a sense of priority and making sure we have time to pay attention, to tune in. God, even through Dean's story, I'm reminded of the ways you are at work. And sometimes it takes years and years to awaken someone to something new. And it takes a community of friends to come along and to encourage and call out things that they see as gifts and strengths that nudge us in the right direction. And so I guess I want to be a community too that sees the good in each other and nudges each other forward, whatever that looks like, to live into the fullness of what you're asking us to be and who you're asking us to be. God, so grateful for our community here in Oakville and in St. John's and in Hamilton and in Richmond and the way you're bringing us together. God, I'm excited about the idea that maybe perhaps there's a young woman or man here in our community right now today who is on this journey of discovering Jesus, who maybe down the line as they pull up their seat in a significant way helps us discover more of who we need to be as they plant and lead the church. Maybe the person who takes over for me and does a way better job of leading is already in this room. Or maybe they will come next week for the first time because a friend invites them and they pull up a chair here in this theater and they hear about the love and grace of Jesus for the first time. Man, give us imaginations to think of what can be and to believe again that you are up to things. Forgive us for shutting you down and assuming that all of life is just dry because our experience feels dry. So reimagine and reawaken us and help us to dream and be bold and courageous. One small step at a time, nudge us in that direction. That inspires me, God, to think of someone who may come in this room maybe the most significant leader we need down the line. And our job is just to love them and introduce them to Jesus. So God, we just want to listen. We want to pay attention. We don't want to think it's a heavy thing. We want to think that that life of that posture of listening and tuning is actually what leads us to true life and true identity. And so thanks that we have moments like this just to carve and set aside, to take deep breaths in and exhale. And God, pay attention to you. We want to listen. We want to pay attention. We want to cheer each other on. Teach us what that means.